Good evening and welcome to the Pompey Politics Podcast, the podcast where we tackle matters of national, international, and local importance in a measured, reasonable, and kind way to get to the heart of the matter. It's party season, and I'm Ian Tiny Morris.
And I'm Simon Sansbury, and although neither of us have been to conference, we've spoken to some people that have, so can talk on to the. But yes, the main national parties. So we're not, I'm afraid, spending any time on Plaid Cymru or on the SNP. But we'll look at what is now a very crowded field of the major five in British politics.
How things have changed. Only a couple of years ago, we would have only had to deal with three and would have been able to brush some of the others aside as not important. But no, five party conferences to look after. And in an auspicious start, you've forgotten how to say the word people, and I couldn't remember the word conference. So hopefully it's going to get better from here. I promise you we have not been at the Christmas sherry early. So it's been going on for a few weeks, and obviously the great and the good and the faithful gather to gird their loins and nourish their souls before they head off into another year of politicking. So where did the season start?
So the season started way back with Reform on the 5th and 6th of September. They had theirs at the NEC in Birmingham, so we kind of started off with them. So should we kind of, just before I kind of leap into kind of doing those, we've gladly got a volunteer from each political party who's recorded a short interview to give us a bit of a report of what they got out of conference and their kind of observations of conference. But just before we do that, I'm going to do the usual kind of housekeeping things of, please do make sure that you give us a like, give us a follow, give us a subscribe on YouTube. Do remember, Facebook only saves live stream videos for a month now, so if you want to kind of look at more of our back catalogue, the best place to do that is actually on YouTube. You can scan our QR code in the top right hand corner to find our website and to sign up for our weekly newsletter. And also don't forget that next week we've got the all important by-election hustings in Paulsgrove. So
we haven't. It's too early for pantomime season. We've got British voters overseas next week, and then Paulsgrove the week after, Simon.
That's not true, because the election's on the 23rd, so it would be a bit silly doing it the week later.
Oh yeah. Oh.
I mean,
I've lost a week
after the election would be an interesting departure. But yeah, you've lost. Look, I was the one that was ill with flu and had COVID. Why?
Yeah.
So
no, it's the 12th, isn't it?
Guys, next week.
It's the 12th. Yeah. It's the big by-election next week. Right. Enough of this nonsense. Enough of this disorganised shambles.
So
let's get on with
the
much more organised Reform conference. And our lead-off man is Terry Norton.
Yes, indeed. So thank you, Terry, for your comments. Here we go. Let us know what you think. Do give us some comments in the chat as you go, guys.
Evening, everybody. Simon, Ian, and the team at the Pompey Politics Podcast have asked me to say a few words as we come to the end of conference season around Reform UK's party conference, which took place early in the season. It was the first political party to have their conference in Birmingham this year, and I couldn't attend in person. I had an operation around that time and was recovering. But what I did manage to do was watch it online in its entirety, and I was really impressed with the party's ability to get out to the membership and be open and transparent and say, look, this is our conference, and they've done that across the board. You know, when it comes to policy ideas and launches, when it comes to the election onto the party board, they're getting out to the membership and saying, if you can't be here in person, let us give you the opportunity to participate. I'm really impressed with that. So any conference is about socialising, of course, but it's also about major policy ideas. And you should learn something, in my view, at the end of a conference. And we certainly got that from Reform this year, with Nigel talking about, doubling down, of course, on tougher immigration controls, but launching things like the idea to scrap indefinite leave to remain and replace it with a 5-year renewable work visa, as we see in many countries. There was lots of talk around funding for things like crime and law and order, an issue particularly important to my heart, with 17 billion going into cutting crime, and that of course includes the additional recruitment of police officers. But what was refreshing was to hear that, an acknowledgement of the difference between feeling safe and being safe. It's no good just telling people there are more police officers and you're safer if you don't feel it. So a real acknowledgement to work with communities to find out how we can make them feel safer as well as be safer, and that was really important. But the key thing for me was around putting the right people in the right jobs, and lots of talk of people with experience coming in to government. Okay, so if you're a teacher, if you are a doctor, if you're a retired chief constable, the party wants to use that talent to say, right, let's go into the Home Office. Let's take you into the Department for Education. Let's take you into the Department for Health, so that we're shaping policy and ideas from those who have experience, not just career politicians who have kind of never worked a day in their life, some of them, and worked their way up through political associations. And that was really, really reassuring. Now, I've had a look at some of the other conferences as well. It was interesting to me that we saw a lot of singing of the national anthem and waving flags, something that I don't think Liberal Democrats would ever dream of doing. But all of a sudden, they're very keen on that. Labour did the same. The pictures and images that I've seen from the Conservative Party conferences, that it looked quite quiet. From attending those in previous years, there has been a decline, I think, in interest in conference, and the energy has was sapped out in previous years. I'm not sure if that was the same this year. I wasn't there, but you only see images from various sources, don't you? So it's difficult for me to know for sure. But for the Reform Conference, the key word for me was absolute energy and buzz. It felt to me, from speaking to people that were there and from watching it online, that the party are serious about being a government in waiting. They're serious about having conversations with the membership to say, come on, let's take you with us. And they're serious about turning this strength of feeling that we're seeing across the nation at the moment into votes and into wins at the ballot box. So a high energy conference, which was super professional in my eyes, and will only grow from strength to strength in the forthcoming years, and I look forward to attending in person next year. Perhaps I can come back on and let you know what it's like being around the fringe events. Hope that's helpful, and enjoy the rest of the show.
There we go. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, thank you, Terry. And I guess, even not being there, if you are in the inner kind of circle of reform or actively engaged, you'd expect there to be a high energy and an anticipation, isn't there? The polls are often wrong, but at the moment there's no ambiguity in it, is it, that reform are way ahead in the polls and surging on a kind of popular support kind of wave at the moment. So understandable, they'd all be feeling pretty good about themselves. So Terry touched on a couple of policies there. Simon, have you got some others to pluck out from the list of what was announced?
Yeah, I think, well, from our relentless research, I think that there's a kind of a fair bit of a theme about preparing for government, and kind of working on the theme that they're working towards effectively winning the next general election and actually being able to govern. Other commentators or other observers would have kind of pointed out that it seems to be their way of achieving that. That government experience is welcoming ex-Conservatives into the fold, and whether reform, how reform councils are doing actually in the governing in the daylight, as it were. So everybody finds it easy to find answers or slogans in opposition, don't they? So the real test is actually how you govern. So that I think that's a key thing for everybody, in the sense of everybody in their conference is going to find oh, well, we would have done this, or the government are not, the government aren't being ambitious enough, or X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
that's a kind of call out for all of them. But sorry, I was going to move on to
well,
that.
yeah. I mean, opposition is always easy, isn't it? Opposition is the missed a bit, and I guess from Reform's perspective, at the moment, a lot of their people are ex-Conservatives. Obviously, Terry, with high-profile deputy chief and crime commissioner in Hampshire, and Conservative councillor. So, I guess the thing for Reform is that obviously they won a number of councils now. It gives them that opportunity to demonstrate what they'll do when they've got their hands on the tiller, and based on how successful those things are, then the people that run those councils, obviously when the general election comes, will be able to point at 3 years of running something, and I guess if it's been a success, then that's the little flag that they can wave. But let's have a look. Were there some other policies that caught the eye?
So some bits. So just a couple to kind of call out the differences between them. I think. Unsurprisingly, they talked about tougher immigration and deporting policies and ending indefinite leave to remain and replacing that with a stricter, more and renewable work visa and extending the amount of time that's needed from 5 to 7 years for citizenship. So essentially, kind of overturning indefinite leave to remain and replacing that with a cyclical visa that needs refreshing. And they expanded on their policy for stop and search and crime pledges. So to get the police to be more aggressive and in their use of an implementation of stop and search. By aggressive, I mean pursuing it more fully. They don't mean violent. That's
No.
They said a lot about climate and essentially scrapping the net zero commitments and essentially following the American stance of drill baby drill. I think their key kind of coup announcement was the defection of Danny Kruger from the Conservative Party. That was kind of the key kind of things, I think.
Yeah, and to be honest, I mean, neither of us Reform supporter. A little bit underwhelmed. Okay, I guess they were going to play to their strengths, their high focus on immigration. It seems to be what's winning them their popular support. For me, the bigger issues won't surprise anyone. With me as a fiscal conservative, is kind of well, it's all very well kind of. I'm much more interested in economics than I am in headline grabbing. And the Green, I guess that they've set their stall out pretty clearly on that. So I guess playing to the home crowd a bit, but why wouldn't you 3-4 years out from a general election when you're on the crest of a wave? So
no, I mean to be fair, that's the point of a conference. You are
yeah,
playing, to your home crowd. That's kind of the thing. That's the reason. In fact, I'm almost surprised that they didn't have like another defection lined up that they were going to announce just before the Conservative Party conference opened, for example. That would have probably put there, but obviously that wasn't something they had up their sleeves. I was waiting for another grabbing of the headlines.
Yeah, and I guess Danny Kruger, yes, Conservative MP. I had to go and look him up. Prue Leith, the famous cookery writer, her son. But I wouldn't say he was a massive name. But he's crossed the divide. He's there as a Reform MP now. So they started it in September. Who followed them as the next act on?
So the next one, according to my Ready Reckoner, was the Lib Dems on the 20th to the 23rd of September, Bournemouth International Centre. So down on the south coast. To speak to us about the Lib Dem conference, we've got James Reed, who is the chair of. He's a. Oh, sorry, where's my notes gone? He's the vice chair of Southampton Lib Dems. Hopefully that doesn't start any kind of turf wars, because obviously we're based in Portsmouth. And he's the vice chair on South Central Lib Dems. So a seasoned conference goer. So should we hear what James
Let's
had
have
to
a
say?
listen.
When I first went to a conference back in sort of the late noughties, it was to get involved in debates, to meet people from other areas, to to vote in debates and to get training. These days, because I've been involved for such a long time, a lot of it is social for me. So it's meeting friends and colleagues from around the country that I get to see twice a year at conferences. There are some debates that I go and listen to and discuss. I've never actually spoken on conference stage myself, but there are things that I go to vote on, but largely it's a social aspect, and some years it's the only holidays I get as well. So I kind of go and I have a holiday by the seaside, and I go out for nice meals and see friends from around the country. So the next conference is in York in March, and I'm considering staying up for an extra couple of days and being a tourist for a couple of days after the conference, after everyone rushes home. Networking as well. So obviously as a regional officer, face-to-face meetings with people that I've spoken to via email or via the phone is quite useful. And this year I did actually attend some agent specific training. So I'm election agent for parliamentary elections, sorry, and keeping on the right side of the law with some of that training face to face is quite useful. I've always found them particularly positive experiences. This was, I think, our second autumn conference since we had 72 MPs elected. Obviously, the best result in a generation, well, in 100 years, more than one generation. And it's really nice to once again be able to see an MP and not necessarily know their name. Last year, I was on the English exec, and we had a backdrop I get on our stall with the photo of every single MP and their constituency, and there was a bit of a sort of running joke of can the MPs name every one of their colleagues, which some of them got pretty close to doing actually. But yeah, that was quite interesting. Quite fun, and seeing them all up on stage during the leader's speech is always good as well. Always make sure I go to the leader's speech. I think there wasn't sort of a keynote announcement that I particularly paid attention to. I think sometimes you end up being in a bit of a conference bubble. So I mean, I certainly don't. It's sometimes interesting to sort of ask other people who weren't there how it went down in the press, what the press thought of the conference, because although you see a lot of the press when you're there, you're not really paying attention to it. I'm certainly not paying attention to that particularly. I unfortunately one of the days I wasn't actually very well, and I holed up in my room for the day, and I looked out of my room, and I looked along a bit, and there was Ed Davey on the grass outside being interviewed by the press, sort of one after the other. That was their sort of in on the grass in the sunshine with the sea in the background. That was quite fun. I mean, I think a lot of the focus seemed to shift away from being the alternative to the Conservatives as to being the alternative to reform. A lot of Ed's speech was, Trump's America, don't let it become Farage's Britain. He said that a number of times, and that went down very well in the hall as it always does. That and closer relationship with Europe, which always gets a big cheer at conference. So yeah, I'm not 100% sure if there were big policy shifts particularly, but it was that sort of shift of focus to focusing on being, frankly, the polar opposite to reform, and acknowledging, I suppose, the fact that Labour and the Conservatives don't actually seem to be winning many elections, by-elections that you see sort of up and down the country. It seems to be hustle reform almost.
Interesting.
So an interesting kind of mix of the more kind of social aspect, in the sense of it's an opportunity to kind of meet up with people.
Yeah, slightly different take, wasn't it? And I guess as a sort of seasoned campaigner who was there, and appreciate James giving us the time for that. No, I'm interested to hear. Have we got a list of policies, or
Yeah.
at the risk
So
of being slightly provocative, or was it simply Ed Davey on a unicycle juggling Euro flags with Ode of Joy playing in the background?
not quite. So kind of
Yeah.
the key kind of announcements that we took away were talking about windfall tax on banks to help fund lower energy bills, halving energy prices, and an energy by 2035, an energy security bank to help homeowners and businesses invest in cleaner energy measures, and delinking gas and electricity prices, which is, if you get into the weeds of it, is kind of part of the reason why wholesale electricity prices kind of fluctuate or as volatile as they are in the UK. Stronger rights and support for migrants and asylum seekers. Electoral reform, that old mainstay of Lib Dem policy, trying to change the political landscape with a fairer voting system, public infrastructure and transport, and real world policies. So there were several things about that civil engineers were behind, or in regards to infrastructure policies and stuff. So yeah, some probably not necessarily some. I think probably not as headline grabbing or as limelight grabbing as perhaps some of the others, but important and considered policies nonetheless.
Yeah, I do, quite a grown-up list of policies, isn't it? And I don't mean that it sounds more flippant than I mean it. In that kind of, I do, I'm always perplexed by the Lib Dems, and I know some Lib Dems are, but 71 MPs, best result for 100 years. But I do wonder whether that list is straying into perhaps the same mistake that was made around Brexit. There's been a lot of navel gazing about, the reason why Brexit won is because the Remain campaign was, it'll be bad if it's them. And I do wonder, by playing in the green energy and the kind of immigration space, there is a little bit of playing in reform's agenda rather than offering kind of that the energy prices. I think they perhaps could have done a bit more with that, because as when people look at their energy prices each month, their energy bills, particularly in the business world, it's, if there's something they could really do about that, then that feels like that could have been bigger. It's just my observation, but
But it
feels,
sounds like your criticism isn't so much the policies, but the fact that more wasn't made of them.
well, it's more a case of the policies are sort of, as I say, it's the reform agenda is immigration and that sort of
Is that
almost,
reform without a capital letter?
it could be a bit of both, I guess. I just think that having been so successful at the last general election, with a kind of general disdain, disappointment with Labour, the Conservatives being a bit flat, could the Lib Dems have done a bit more to kind of pull the spotlight onto themselves and what they could offer, rather than, well, we're not him. Anyway, that's a muse. As I say, there's nothing in their policies there. Obviously, headlines, aren't they? So you need to dig deeper. But
Yeah, you'd have to. I mean, we're going to say that tried or tested thing. If you want to know more in detail about different these policies, do your own research.
Exactly,
But
exactly that. So
oh no,
after the,
what have we said? No.
what have we said? It's not a good Lord. We don't want any detailed research or careful thought. This is a politics show. We should just scream at each other until everyone gets tired and goes home. But if we avoid that, who was at the midpoint then? Who was the centrist of the five conferences.
So the centrist from scheduling perspective was the
Yes.
Labour Party conference, and I mean some commentators might say from the policy perspective too, but that's for them. So yeah, so theirs was basically the end of September. So they kind of had the middle ground, held in Liverpool. So we've got comment on that, and let me just play that video, and then we can talk about what their policies were. So let's have a go.
So, hello, my name is JEMMA ARTEMIS and I attended the Labour Party conference this year in Liverpool. I went as the delegate for Portsmouth North, so I had the responsibility to represent the constituency and then listen to any debates on the conference floor, then vote on any motions the party then take on into policy. It was really good to go. Being part of that democratic process within the party was just the best. It was also an amazing opportunity to then find out what's in the works for the government in the near future. It was my first ever time attending a conference and I loved it. It was so exciting to experience the buzz around the place, and definitely a vibe of things starting to be on the up. You know, policies are gaining traction, long-term investment projects are getting off the ground, and all these things should really begin to make a difference in people's lives. My standout moment, other than Keir's really great speech, was actually Rachel Reeves. Some really good announcements in there for long-term plans, but there was also a bit in there that really stood out to me personally. So for me in particular is when she talked about school libraries. My mum used to be the school librarian at Charles Dickens Primary and she loved that job. She really put her heart into getting to know what the kids liked, getting them interested in reading. She really built them up from getting interested in comic books to then reading proper Harry Potter length novels in a particularly deprived area of the city, where parents aren't necessarily have the time or the resources to buy kids' books. That really got them into reading in a way that they hadn't been before, and it made a huge difference, not just in their literacy lessons, but they found joy in reading. And unfortunately, with school budget cuts year on year, things got tighter. She had to put off buying new stock, and then eventually her hours got cut so much she left, and it was really tough and heartbreaking. But hearing Rachel Reeves talk about how important those things are and life-changing it can be for those kids, especially for the COVID generation coming up, it really stayed with me. And all the conference speeches were filled with little bits like that wouldn't necessarily make the headlines on their own, but are still something that will have a huge impact, and they would go under the radar. Knowing how much that work meant to my mum actually really made me quite emotional on the conference floor, and it got the recognition it deserved. It's really great to know that the government gets it in a way that the previous one didn't, and it really showed what difference they want to make. But yeah, overall I had the best time and I'm definitely going back next year. But yeah, thank you.
JEMMA ARTEMIS there, giving us her report from her first conference. So and a very personal kind of connection with the announcements there.
And I think that for me was lovely, Simon, because often, we talk about the big headlines and, a number of people say, oh, I'm not interested in politics. Politics has a bearing on everything. And to hear Gemma speak so passionately there about, children reading and kind of that personal connectivity, it is the piece where it draws people, sometimes it's the smaller issues that draw people into politics because that's kind of what matters to them. And nice to hear some support for Rachel Reeves. She doesn't always get the easiest ride, and nice to hear a shout out for Harry Potter as well. Again, somebody who perhaps wouldn't naturally be called out in a good way at a Labour Party conference. So very personal connections there. What were the headlines in terms of the big ticket policies?
So, I think there was a tone about renewal of Britain, and framing an attack on reforms policies and how those will be a regression. Talk about housing and the new towns plan. There's a plan of 12 new towns up and down the country to help towards the housing needs. Stuff about sentencing reform and criminal justice review. So looking at the sentencing bill and reforms to how community sentences are treated and can be given prominence. There were some internal discussions kind of talked about with regard to obviously leadership, party discipline, mentioning about Gaza. So there were, there's some, there was an emergency motion from the union, and there was basically seeking to make comment about the situation in Gaza, and essentially kind of a theme of kind of fiscal pressures and difficult choices. So yeah, and obviously that's kind of coming ahead a couple of months ahead of well, at the end of next month, isn't it? Is the budget?
Rachel's big budget bonanza. Yeah, and well attended conference. I think reports were well over 20,000 people there. No, I think there was a lot of reporting, wasn't there, that Nigel Farage's name came up more often than anybody else at the Labour Party conference. So it's clear his and Reform's popularity has kind of got them rattled. I still remain slightly sympathetic to Labour in so much as, the COVID and the Ukrainian crisis has the cupboard is bare, and I think their internal membership, who are passionate and driven, are wanting more, but unless Rachel scraps her fiscal rules and starts borrowing money at sky high interest rates, I'm not sure where she's going to find the money to delight the membership to take them forward. So yeah, I think the towns thing is an interesting one, because we'll come on to that. The housing, I think most people recognise, when people look at their bank statement each month, it's the rent and the mortgage, which is, particularly if you're renting, is causing you most strife financially. And 12 new towns, well, I guess there's always that question. I can almost feel a Councillor Cal Corkery on my shoulder talking about affordable housing and how much of it will be available. So no, good turnout, lots of energy, and and a very nice personal report from a first-time conference goer.
Yeah. So yeah, but I think it's kind of interesting to kind of think about kind of the party morale and party strategy between kind of the different parties. If you're in opposition and you're in ascendance, it's actually quite easy to kind of ride that wave and have quite a buoyant conference. If you're in opposition and you're in, you're contracting, then it's hard to kind of know how you kind of get much more positive buzz and and energy out of that situation. Likewise, if you're a party of government, you on one hand, just over a year ago they won a landslide majority in Parliament, but with only about 30% of the vote, and there isn't exactly a cupboard full of billions of pounds worth of money to spend on things that they would probably want to do. So it's very much a four-dimensional chess, but it's kind of an interesting thing of, yes, it's difficult, but also the general election is several years away, and a lot can happen in that time, I guess.
Exactly. So in the interest of time, who was fourth?
So fourth was the Greens. They were also in Bournemouth. And we've got friend of the pod, Elliott Lee, who gave us their report from Bournemouth. So let me play that.
Hi everyone, for those who don't know me, I'm Elliott. I use he, they pronouns, and I'm the coordinator of Portsmouth Green Party. I was at Green Party conference over the weekend, just gone, and the best way I can describe it was hope. Hearing our new leader, Zach Polanski, speak was so inspirational, moving, and emotive. I probably even shed a tear at some points. He spoke so well about bringing hope back into politics and making it feel real again. We also heard from our deputy leaders, Moffin, who spoke amazingly about what it means to be a man, what it was like to experience poverty. We heard from our other deputy leader, Rachel, who spoke passionately based on her experiences of being disabled, what it means to be British, and how young people are a force for change in this country. Now, what's particularly different about Green Party conferences compared to other party conferences is that it's not actually the leaders that make policy, it's the members. One member, one vote. So that means a member who joined last month has the same amount of power effectively as the leader. So a lot of the conference we spent debating, discussing, putting forward new policy and ultimately voting on it. So much went through this conference. It was one of the biggest ones we've ever had. So it was so productive. Some big policies was, you've probably already heard about it, is about effectively abolishing landlordism, which title somewhat misleadingly, it's all about putting more controls on rents, making it harder for landlords to ultimately exploit tenants through taxes, and it's about building new homes as well, more affordable homes. We also voted on prescribing the IDF. We voted on a new deal for carers, recognising care experience as a special characteristic as well. An anti-racism policy went through too. So much to think about. Another big one was on our political strategy for the next few years. So last year we aimed to win 4 seats. Going forward, we hope to win 30 to 40 seats at the next general election, 2 Senate seats next year, 3 to 4 mayoral seats next year. And yeah, I mean, the overall message was that, you know, we are still a party of protest, but we are very much likely to become a party that could govern in the next few years. And yeah, so much hope to think about. And I think from a local coordinator point of view, these conferences are so important as well to our volunteers. These last few years have been quite difficult, very hard hitting, loads of elections going on, loads of tense debate. It's important for them to, it's important for motivating our volunteers. It's good for their well-being just to get away even, to meet colleagues across the region, make plans, and yeah, build a strategy for a brighter, greener future. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and Elliott, you know, always talks very passionately, and you know, is a what I would call a conviction politician. It's always clear that, you know, when Elliott speaks, it comes from the heart. You know, he's not a career politician. I think he acknowledged there the Greens are still a little bit of a party of protest, which is, you know, is the struggle to electorally, you know, in Portsmouth particularly. But did he miss any of the big headline policies out there, Simon, or did pretty much cover them?
Yeah, he pretty much kind of covered them. There was an emphasis on wealth tax, so taxing the richest to in order to combat what Zach Polanski described as rip-off Britain. Elliott talked about the abolishing landlords motion, and that's not as kind of perhaps as kind of hard, yeah, as kind of immediate as it kind of sounds, but it talks about essentially renters, the payments that they made being used essentially, that if the landlord's selling to actually be used as kind of part payment onto the house. They talked about migration and asylum, talking about pro-immigration framing. So in deep contrast to the reform and conservative policies on that, and some of the language from Labour. More about their internal leadership and party direction. Zach, I think, has described himself as an eco-populist, so a kind of different tone. And to be fair, you can kind of see that from his media coverage that he's had since. He certainly seems to have been got much more media coverage than leaders of the Greens have before.
Yes.
Talk about civil liberties and protest and foreign policy motions. Sorry, so some stuff around there defending rights to protest and criticising governmental use of anti-terror laws or policing powers. So yeah, kind of a lot there about. I think around there's kind of quite the mix there about economy, ethics, morals, and environment. So yeah, I think there was a lot there. I'll come back to it in a minute if we get a second. Something that's kind of I'm noticing is that a couple of the commenters, a couple of those interviews, people talk about how their party is the only party doing X, Y, Z in how they engage with members or how they decide policies, or having and I'll park that and put a pin on it. Let's have this discussion about kind of interesting that they say very different things.
Yeah, I think, if you look at it, the Greens, they're seeing a surge in membership. They're very excited about that. I think it feels to me very much like the surge in membership in Labour under Corbyn. A lot of those policies would resonate with the kind of momentum faction of Labour. Very strong. Elliott called it out, wanting to prescribe the Israeli Defense Force as a terrorist organization, playing to a lot of that narrative. I did think the green that Zach Polanski was wearing might have been Sherwood green, with his Robin Hood policy of take from the rich and give to the poor. It still feels to me, Simon, a little bit, and just echoing Elliott's words there, about a party of protest. If you are in the position of the Greens, where you've got strong, passionate support, but in probably, are unlikely to win more than a handful of seats, you can pass policies on pretty much everything, because they're almost certainly never going to become into reality. But no, you can see why the energy is there. Reform is seeing a surge in membership on the right of politics, so you'd expect there to be a balance to that. And at the moment, the Greens seem to be getting that surge. But I guess, just for fairness, numerically, I think estimates they had between 1,000 and 3,000 at their conference, compared to 12,000 at Reform and 20,000 at Labour. So still small, but with a new energy and vigour. Would that be fair?
Yeah, well, they certainly seem to have been given a new lease of life with their new leader. He's certainly, as I say, coming across very strong in media appearances, and he's very forcefully and very directly challenging some of the simplest populist narratives that are being used by others, or indeed are being used by some interviewers in the media. So I think he's doing a very good job of actually heightening awareness of the Greens and what their actual policies are. And I think they're on they're on a march to be 100,000 members. So they've overtaken the Lib Dems in membership size. So it will be interesting to see how much that can be translated into electoral wins. Because
And
parties rely on their
yeah,
membership to get things done. So that's very much a watch
yeah.
this space kind of thing.
And that's why I kind of compared them to Labour under Corbyn. You know, there was a huge surge in popular membership of the Labour Party at the time. I can't remember the numbers, but I think it was like 300,000 people joined, and you know, got that very, very strong membership growth. And I think I saw somewhere that even though it's not started yet, kind of your party, I think already has 70, 80, 90,000 members in waiting. So, you know,
When you say my party, or you mean right? Sorry, no.
yeah, not
So
your
every time
party.
someone says that,
Yeah. No, I see your problem. So
yeah,
it's your party, and I'll cry if I want to.
Indeed.
So yes.
So
Which I guess brings us on to our final act, the Sundowners,
yeah,
not the headline,
shall I quickly?
probably not the headliners, but
Do you want me to quickly mention that point that I said to put a pin in,
oh
or do you
yeah,
want me to do that after?
yep.
So just some kind of interesting things, because Terry said about him being surprised about the live streaming at Reform's conference and their engagement with members. Certainly, other parties live stream, and you can join their conferences remotely, and you can even still vote remotely. That's not always been the case, but I think after COVID, lots of parties have kind of developed mechanisms to do that. But with regard to policy, and I'm sorry, I've just quickly chat GPT'd this, but it's so they said that the Conservative parties, the leadership dominates party policy, with members and activists being able to contribute to ideas but not have formal power to set policies. If there's a member of the Conservative Party listening and wants to absolutely take the mickey out of us for getting that wrong, please say so. Labour members, trade unions and affiliates all have input, but the leader in NEC ultimately shaped the final policy platform. Although there is there are obviously different separate bodies within the party that draft policies and feeding into conference, and the conference votes on policy motions. So that summary is kind of really possibly not kind of a fair. The Lib Dems, it gives the summary of grassroots literally deciding policy through conference votes. Leadership able to shape emphasis but not override member decisions. So the conference, there's a conference organising committee that essentially kind of agree what the policy motions are that are accepted to put to conference, and the members at the conference vote on basically what those policies are. So there isn't, in that respect, that's kind of not a million miles from what Elliott was talking about the Greens, about members deciding what policies are. And the summary it gives for the Greens about strong democratic and bottom up, every member can help make a change for policy. So conference party, it refers to that as being sovereign. That's that word. And policy committee helping structure and maintain the policies for a sustainable society. So there's a lot kind of to get into, but I just find it interesting that the mechanisms, that there are some key differences between some of the political parties about how they shape their policies and what their mechanisms for doing that. But I don't think anybody can solely claim that they are in a leading competition to be the most democratic party. I think maybe there's a little bit of nuance in that one. That's
I think you're spot on there, Simon, isn't it? It's that kind of element of everyone, they all have different mechanisms, and I think all have their pluses and minuses. So let's move on to our final act. So the Conservative Party,
yes,
and another friend of the pod, Ben Swan.
Councillor Ben Swan of Copner. So theirs was the last one. So it started on a Sunday, this one, which kind of seems a bit of a departure to the others. So from October 5th till Wednesday, October 8th. But theirs was in Manchester. So let's hear what Ben had to say about the Conservative conference.
The bonus of going really is to be able to meet up with other councillors and MPs and basically kind of discuss different ideas, get a bit of best practice on issues that we face here that they may also face in their authorities as well. So it's a good learning experience, and it's a good exchange of ideas as well. Pretty positive, actually. I think there's a lot of optimism. I think obviously we know where we are in the polls and the kind of public standing, but I think there's some good policies coming out now, and I think we're starting to kind of find our feet again, and I think this is a real fresh start for us. Yeah, I found that the press reporting didn't really reflect the actuality of the conference. I think there was a lot made of empty seats and things, and I think any conference, depending on when you're actually in a room and depending on who's speaking, you're going to have empty seats. But actually, I think the attendance was very much on par with every conference I've been to, really. So, there's a lot of positivity. People are feeling buoyed about where we're going from here. I mean, obviously, it's been a down few years for us, and obviously the polls are still not great reading, but there does seem to be kind of the shoots of something good happening. So it was a good atmosphere. Yeah, so I think the stamp duty was a really important one because it's been a regressive tax for a long time. So I think that really speaks to the parties want to address the housing issue, if you like, and kind of make it a bit more accessible for people. I also thought the British benefits for British people was a key line as well. I think, obviously there are some issues that are very much in the public eye at the moment, but I think the bloated benefit system is an issue at the moment, and I think that's something that really resonates with people, that it just seems to be something that is just open to abuse at the moment and doesn't really function how it's supposed to be. So this kind of approach to really try and finally get to grips with that is really positive news. I think there's been too much of an attempt to try and be all things to all people, really, I think in the past, and I think now we're seeing policies that are true to ourselves, as it were. A lot more what you would perhaps describe as traditional conservative policies, which is absolutely fantastic. Is really what I wanted to hear, and it was good to hear, and I think that's going to resonate. I think it's going to take time for people to actually sort of look into the detail of what we're talking about. But again, that's important as well, because we are, there's flesh on the bone of what we're talking about, whereas I think other parties, they're throwing out taglines and policies and things, but there's no actual theory behind what they're actually saying, and I think that's going to be quite key. I don't think there's any doubt it's going to be another very tough election, but I think it can, returning to some traditional conservative policies and a more conservative looking party in general, I think can only help us. Obviously, the proof is going to be in the pudding, and it's going to be about getting that messaging out. But I'm optimistic. I'm definitely optimistic.
So, Ben's optimistic.
I'm optimistic, Ben, and for me, acknowledgement there that the last few years, if you're a Conservative, have been bloody awful, and the expectation of there being plenty of empty seats. I guess, I don't know about you, Simon, I would have been surprised if there weren't, because we know even locally, many Reform are gathering a lot of their people who are ex-Conservatives. So people that might have been at the Conservative conference before will not have been there this time. But interesting, I guess, that Ben touched there on a return to Conservative values. Was there anything else on the policy list that
So the notes that I got were, of course, the abolish the stamp duty on main homes for UK residents, creation of a removals force to mirror ICE in the US, and with the goal of deporting 150,000 migrants a year. the golden rule fiscal framework and rebalancing savings versus tax cuts. So the fiscal rules by another name. Scrapping or scaling back climate and energy related taxes and rolling back net zero drivers, abolishing carbon taxes, and exempting many high street shops, pubs, and leisure businesses from business rates. I mean, that's quite an interesting one in the sense of combating the inherent massive advantage that large multinationals have in not having to have premises on the high street, which are expensive, and finding ways to either avoid or not pay tax. Whereas, oh God, I can't believe I'm just about to say this. Whereas Wetherspoons, for example, obviously are right on the high street, and oh God, I'm not defending Tim Martin now.
Go on, do it.
So, I mean, to be fair, that's actually been something he's been campaigning for quite some time. Is actually feeling that, pubs, etc., should be exempt from VAT in order to help those basically give that bit of freedom and space and more money back in the pockets of those businesses. So yeah, so those were kind of the main policies, but
a little bit playing to Reform's agenda, and I guess we saw that with Labour's regular mentioning of Nigel, and obviously a couple of key parts there. The stamp duty one's a bit of an odd one for me. It's kind of 9 billion. I guess there's that element of, if you've got to find a 10% deposit for a £200,000 flat, you've got to find 20,000. I'm not sure whether taking the stamp duty off is going to make much of a difference. Yeah, and again, I think you touched on it in a comment I think you made online. It's that element of when you look at supply and demand, the housing market. Labour's talked about new towns, which is on the supply side. The Greens have talked about house. Well, I don't know what they're going to do to landlords, but effectively try and persuade them to give up their properties because it's no longer worthwhile having them, which obviously is going to affect the demand, the supply side, and whereas this policy looks to me to stimulate demand, which I'm
is the opposite of what you want.
Well, I'm a little bit confused by it, but I guess
I don't get how. I must admit, that kind of gives me a head scratch. I don't understand how increasing demand. And, let's be honest. The people at the higher end of it, I can appreciate there's probably people being pinched who are kind of right at one tipping point from one banding of stamp duty or another. But for most, for the largest kind of, if you really wanted to kind of help people with the least amount of money, you'd basically increase the minimum value to which stamp duty applies, and you would mean that didn't just apply to first time buyers, for example. But again, that would help kind of changing of hands of lower value properties, which is what you need to do to kind of allow to bring the house pricing down in order to enable more people to buy houses and therefore not have to rent and pay someone else's mortgage.
I
think that makes sense to me, but I'm not an economist. I'm just
and I think again, as Ben spoke to, low taxation and that golden fiscal rule obviously caught my eye in terms of basically it said, well, we're gonna. It was interesting that. For me, it looks like austerity on steroids. And when you've done austerity on steroids, basically you're going to use half the money you save to pay the credit card bill, and the other half you're going to give away in tax cuts. So that is conservative gold in terms of. But
I mean, it's nice thing to say, but it depends on you finding the savings, doesn't it?
Well, it does, Simon. But I guess there is that element of, and this will be where all of the parties, I think, have kind of different challenges. But probably the biggest one for the Conservative Party is to get people to listen. I think we
Who said
touched on it
that?
in the podcast. Well, by the end of the period, wasn't it? When they said, there was all this, well, you need to close this loophole for non-DOMs, and they sprung up and said, we're closing the loophole for non-DOMs, and everybody said, oh yeah, whatever. So I
Yeah,
think
yeah. It's kind
that
of it's kind of hard to, because obviously as much as people are getting readily bored of Labour saying it's all the fault of the previous Conservative government,
14 years of Tory
but then there's
neglect.
also the point of, well, hang on a minute, you guys were in power for 14 years. If these were such brilliant ideas and obvious ideas, why didn't you do any of it then?
So I think the interesting thing for me is that all five of our guests got something different. They obviously all felt energized by it. I would say that three of the five parties, their biggest challenge is going to be getting their message out beyond their membership. So obviously Labour, Conservative, Lib Dems, the more traditional parties are struggling to be heard a little bit. The Greens and Reform have got lots of people running towards them. They've got a bit of momentum with a small m. So I guess we will. The first acid test will be in Paulsgrove on Thursday week. So it is ideal that we have a hustings next Sunday. I think we still only got the 3 candidates confirmed.
We do indeed. We've got the Conservative, Reform, and Labour candidates actually taking part in our hustings next week. So that's Thomas Hall for the Conservatives, Joe Standham for Reform, and Sidney Phillips for Labour. It will be interesting to see. What they've got to say for themselves. If you have questions that you want us to put or to consider to put to all of the candidates, and that's one of our hustings rules, is that any question we ask has to be put to all of the candidates that are present. Send that to us, studio@pppodcast.uk. So studio@pppodcast.uk, or you can send us a message on Facebook, or you can find us on all the social medias. Basically, you can kind of message us there. Our QR code to our website, where there is also got the links to where you can get hold of us in various different methods. But yes, so next Sunday at 6:27, we will indeed be having the Paulsgrove by-election hustings.
Until then, you've been listening to the Pompey Politics Podcast. I've been Ian Tiny Morris.
And I've been Simon Sansbury. And just like that, your cat decides to walk across the front of the screen like some sort of minor Bond. She's been Enid
Blyton, and we will see you next week.
Yeah, and I've been Simon Sansbury, and thank you so much to our contributors this week. We really couldn't have made the episode without those contributions. So that's Terry Norton from Reform, James Reed from the Liberal Democrats, Gemma Artemis from Labour. Sorry, the cat keeps distracting me. Sorry, Elliott Lee from the Greens, and Councillor Ben Swan from the Conservatives. So thank you again for taking your time and sending us your videos. They've been really, really, really helpful. So thank you for that. See you next week. Don't forget to send us some questions, and do make sure to give us a kind of a like, follow, subscribe, etc. Please, that would be fantastic. But see you next week. Don't forget to like, follow and comment on Facebook, or comment and subscribe on YouTube. Find us on all the social media platforms: Facebook, X, YouTube, Threads, LinkedIn.